Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Megan, and today I'm coming at you with 4 keys to understanding curriculum reviews. And then I'll have some extra tips at the end. And this goes for any reviews I have or may put up in the future. I'm not immune to this, so I'm not saying all these people are terrible at doing curriculum reviews, watch mine, or anything like that. This is just going to be across the board when you're reading reviews, things you want to keep in mind. So if you're a seasoned homeschooler, this may not be the video for you. If you are a seasoned homeschooler but you've used one thing for a long time and you're just now exploring new things for whatever reason, you might want to tune in. But if you're new, especially you're looking for your first or second pick and you're just not sure, stay tuned because these are going to be 4 great tips with some bonus tips at the end. And like I said, this will go for my reviews. If I have reviews posted, absolutely keep these key things in mind when you're watching mine as well. The first one is the lens that the person is looking through. And I don't mean just for the review, but a life lens. We all look through life with a certain lens, sometimes more than one. And when they're picking their curriculum, they're going to be using that lens. And it may be obvious in some instances, such as finding a good Christian publisher to purchase from, or they're strongly Charlotte Mason, or they're strongly traditional. They're going to be looking through that lens. Other people, it's going to be a little more subtle. They may not come out and say that. And not that that's, like I said, this is not a criticism of curriculum reviews, so I don't want anybody to get the right idea that I'm like bashing other homeschool moms. But we all do. This is natural and we do anything. And so you just need to realize, okay, this person may be a little bit more this than I am. Or you find somebody that's like, okay, she is coming at this from the exact same approach I am. They feel strongly about their faith. They feel strongly about unschooling the way we do. Just keep that in mind, because especially if they're doing like an individual book review, like Explode the Code, that may not come across as strongly. So sometimes checking out what else they use is helpful. Like there's some really popular publishers that people love that we do not like. So if I hear somebody who loves a particular publisher, and I'm like, oh, that just does not fit in with our lifestyle. It doesn't fit in with the way my kids learn. And then they say, well, here's the science we're using for something else. I may look at that science a little bit different and go, okay, well, if this is what works for them and we know it doesn't work for us, the science they pick may also not work for us, if that makes sense. So everybody has those filters. Maybe filters is a better word than lens. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind when you're reading these things. Sorry, I'm on the floor because I'm in my bedroom where I can escape from my family and hopefully not get interrupted too much and not have tons of background noise. So, sitting on the floor, chatting with you guys, drinking my coffee. Okay, so number 2. This is something I come across all the time, and sometimes I struggle with as well. We all do. We all have our favorites. Let's face it, we all have things that we're like, this is the best. And somebody else is looking at it like, are you crazy? We've tried that and we don't like that at all. So, but anyway, every curriculum has its flaws. Now you're going to come across those people that are seriously into a particular publisher, particular curriculum, and they're going to be like, this is the absolute best. If you're not using this, you are using something subpar. I've seen that, especially in the Facebook groups. I join a Facebook group for almost every curriculum I'm looking at, even if I haven't bought it, because that to me is one of the best places to get information, because they're asking questions about what they're having trouble with and they're sharing their successes. So you start to see patterns in both of those things, and the patterns of difficulties that they're having with it will show you sort of those cons to that particular curriculum, and the successes will show you where it shines. So that's like one of my first things that I do. I join a Facebook group if I'm really thinking about buying something, and I start paying attention to that. But every single group I've been in across the board, it doesn't matter what it is, Life of Fred, Becca, Alpha Omega, ACE, CLE, across the board, there's a small group of people, and it's not very many, but it's a few that think that it's the best, it's the only. Anybody who's using anything else is using less than. And if somebody comes in with a question saying they want to switch, or they've been using something, oh, this is the best, you haven't been using the best, why would you switch from the best? If you go to something else, your children aren't going to learn as much or as well, or be as far advanced, or be as well prepared. So, I always take information from people who are like that with a grain of salt. Not that it's not true for their family, that it's the absolute best, but just because it's the best for their family doesn't mean it's going to be the best for my family. And I think sometimes when we think something's the best, it tends to put blinders on us to some of the struggles other people might have with it. And like I said, I am not immune to this. I have some things that I swear by. And if somebody said, well, thanks for the information, I'm not going to try it, I'm going like, well, that's a really good program, why aren't they trying? So, we all do that. It's just human nature. And I'll tell you, the very first experience I had with this was when I first started homeschooling. The first year, my daughter was in 4th grade, and then I had a preschooler and one on the way. And we were in Ohio, and we were part of this little homeschool group that I loved. It was just gym and swim. We had gym for an hour and then swimming for an hour once a week. And it was a really great group of moms. I loved them to death. They helped me so much in that first year, sort of having some community and all of that. So, but the majority of them used Becca, which I'm not complaining about that program at all. I haven't personally used it, and I will say it was mostly because of those moms. I've never even considered looking at it. I've never even I don't think I've ever even seen a preview of it to look at, because every single week we heard all of the moms using it talk about their kids being in tears, their kids struggling, how busy they were, how many hours a day they were spending on school, and it was just a struggle every single day to get it done. And we were unschooling at the time. Our budget was like zero for homeschool. I mean, we were buying pencils and paper, and I think I bought a few things off of eBay, but for the most part, we were unschooling. We were conversational. I call it conversational schooling. I don't think anybody else uses that, but it's my favorite way to homeschool. You're just chatting, you're talking, you're having, back and forth communication. So it's not lecturing or standing at a board teaching. But it's also not unschooling because you're very focused. I don't know. It's my own thing. Whatever. It worked for us for a while. So anyway, compared to what I was doing, that was like, whoa, that's scary. And I asked him one time, I said, well, why, I know there's options out there. I know there's other programs out there. I didn't know much about them at the time because I wasn't researching what I couldn't afford. And they said, because it's the very best there is out there. It's the best education. It's the best program. It's best this. It's best that. And I thought, okay, but is it worth it? And like I said, I'm not bashing them. They thought it was what was best for their kids. It was best for their families. I'm not the one in their house every day making that decision. So, but it was my first experience of hearing somebody say that something was the absolute best and no other option should be considered. And because of that, I've always kind of had that, okay, have you used other things and this is really the best fit for you? Or do you just have this idea that this is the best? So always with a grain of salt. Not that you shouldn't listen to them. And actually, if you go with that curriculum, those are some of the best people to go to. I see some great advice, especially in the CLE group, for people who are struggling from those moms because they've used it for years and years and years with different kids and different types of learners. So they're like the best ones to go to. And you say, hey, we're struggling here. Or what does this mean? Or gosh, we use so many different ones. And this teacher's guide is different from anyone I've ever seen. What does this mean? They're the ones you want answering your questions. So kudos to them for that. And number 3, oh my goodness. When somebody is on a blog or a YouTube channel or whatever, and they're saying that a program is more advanced than any other, or it's more advanced than this one, that's another thing that I've seen on a lot of reviews, and I've seen in the Facebook groups when people are suggesting something. And I've seen it on so many different math programs and so many different language arts programs. I'm like, these can't all be the most advanced, you know. And since I've switched a few times with my oldest, and then my second, third grader, he's right on that line there. I'm seeing overlaps and like pieces here that are taught here in this program and here in this program, and they're in different places. So one might look more advanced one year and one might look more advanced another year, and depending where in the year you are. So I'm not saying that it's not accurate at certain points, but across the board, you can look at scope and sequence, but don't let somebody say this is more advanced than this one and scare you off. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Don't let it scare you off of this one. Now, there's a couple, especially math programs and a couple language arts programs that are behind, that consistently are going to be behind. So I would say there are a few that are more public school or below level, and then the rest are going to be about that public school and above, and they're all going to be, jumbled around a little bit. Math a little bit less, but you have your mastery approach and your spiral approach. So if somebody's doing mastery and they've mastered, long division, and you're like, oh my gosh, my child is way past their grade wise or whatever, in the year, fourth grade year, than this person, and he's not even close, and your kid's doing spiral. Well, they're things they haven't even started learning that your son or daughter is starting to learn and master. So keep those things in mind. There are a few, in my opinion, that don't hit that bar of minimum, in my opinion, but other people may take it and add to it or do videos and make it work for them. So realize that that's kind of a flexible thing. And sometimes it's an opinion thing. Sometimes it is. If you see one in particular, somebody's going to get mad at me, I know, but Matthew C. Is it Matthew C? Teaching textbooks. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Don't listen to me anyway. Listen to other people who have used it. But there's one math program in particular I see over and over and over how far behind it is. And I've never looked at it, but because I see it consistently, I look for those patterns. And that's one that's consistently saying it's behind, and I never see it saying, well, we had to move up a grade when or move down a grade when we switched to this one because it was so much more advanced. Whereas pretty much every other program I've seen it mentioned that they had to move down a level. And I think part of that is just ease of use with a new program. Whereas you might be here with CLE, if you're jumping to Alpha, Omega, well, they approach things differently. So even though you're here, you may test here because it's a new approach. It's a little bit different direction. There are things explained differently in CLE than Alpha, Omega. And so even though it's not really more advanced, you're going to test a little bit lower. Does that make sense? I hope so. So number 4 is I guess I have 5, but anyway, number 4 is remember that some reviews are paid for. Some reviews are done based on free product that they've been given. They've been given that level math. I've seen some on YouTube where they said we were just given this spelling book. They asked us what level we wanted. We picked a level and we did this. And sometimes they've done it for a year. Sometimes they've only done it for a couple months. Other programs, if they're new, maybe the person who's recommending it were part of a beta test. A beta test is a small group of people that you allow to use something for free in order to have people, when you finalize the publishing of it, they can go and recommend it to their friends and in the groups because they've been using it for free for a while, so they know what it's like. Other people have affiliate links, which means they get some money back if you purchase it. And other biases, such as they know somebody, they may be getting they may have some sort of deal collaboration going. And not that their reviews are honest. I'm sure this is one that people are going to get after me too, because they're saying, well, I do that, but my reviews are always honest. I'm not saying there aren't people who are honest about it. I'm not saying that everybody isn't honest to a certain extent about it, but just realize that if that bias is there, you may want to check other sources as well. Absolutely watch their review, read their review, listen to them, but then realize that it's possible for that beta or that bias to be there. I was recently part of a beta test that wasn't part of my Grace and Coffee homeschool or anything, because it's not big enough to even have anybody notice, but in a different group, somebody was looking for beta testers, and I said sure, my kids were the right age. And it came to the end, and she was asking for help, and she was asking for people to review it on her page, to go and share it and share a sale link. We were able to use it for free. It was just a free download. And at the end, I didn't recommend it. I let her know, thank you for this opportunity to try this. But I felt that, for one, it was way too expensive for what it was. And these aren't things I didn't tell her in a very nice, polite, professional way, that I thought so many other curriculums did it better. Not better, less expensive, with more to offer. And now people can make that decision for themselves, so that wasn't the only thing. But I also thought that I thought it was she considered it a full language arts curriculum, and I didn't feel that it was. So I just felt like I would be misinforming people, or leading people to something that wasn't what it said it was, for more money than I thought, they could get something comparable. So that being said, a lot of people in the group, in the beta test, and they all have their own, I'm not saying they didn't believe it was good, but a lot of them were very appreciative and went on to do reviews. So just keep in mind that there may be some, and some of them may have been friends, so just keep in mind that all reviews may have a bias in it. And I know people are going to, some of you are going to have a fit with that one, but okay, so tip number 5, I guess number 5, is to look for patterns. I mentioned it. That's one thing I look for when I'm in Facebook groups. It's one thing I look for in reviews. I like researching. Maybe you don't, so it may not be like you're like, oh, now I have to watch a lot. To me, that sounds, I get to watch a lot. But look for patterns in things people are saying. Look for patterns in the negative reviews and patterns in the positive reviews. When you start to see those patterns, the negative reviews that you start to see patterns may end up being no big deal to you. Like one that, like, we just did a spelling thing that I ended up not using, and it was actually a free download that I found, I think on Teachers Pay Teachers, because every single week, Monday was the exact same activity, Tuesday was the exact same activity. So every week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday were the same as the previous week. So every Monday was the same, every Tuesday was the same. And I knew that would bore my son to tears. So my daughter would have been fine with it, wouldn't have been a big deal. So when I was looking for something different, I wanted to listen to what people said about the activities. Was there a variety of activities? So things that are important to you, you're going to want to, make sure you listen for, and things that you want and what you don't want. And if somebody's don't want isn't the same as yours, then somebody may have a real negative review of something, and you'll be like, oh, that's going to work for us. I see why it didn't work for them, but we have different do's and don'ts, so it probably will work for me. so look at these reviews. I guess I should say look at them with your lens, not the person who's reviewing it lens, and look for those patterns. And I will tell you, to be perfectly honest, this did at one point in particular lead me away from something that I'm using now, and that is CLE learning to read. I have avoided it forever. My daughter loves CLE. It's a great program. I was afraid the workbook thing would bore my son, so that was one thing against it. But also in the CLE group, over and over and over and over and over, I saw the pattern of people having difficulty with the fact that their pronunciation guide was so much a part of the Learning to Read program. And obviously, depending on where you live in the United States, it may be different. And people would post about that constantly. Their child was having a hard time with this because they don't pronounce it that way. And I saw that come up all the time. And I thought, oh, that sounds like one thing I don't want to deal with if it's a consistent pattern of an issue with that program. But as I've used Logic of English, and I've taught my 8-year-old to read and dealt with that on a lesser level, but dealt with it with other programs, I have more confidence now, and I can work through that. Whereas when I first started, like, I was so intimidated with teaching my kids to read that I was trying to avoid any difficulty. And I really wanted something solid that was going to help give me all the tools I needed. And I saw that as a pitfall because it was a pattern. But now that I have my confidence, I thought, okay, I'll try it. I know now how to work around that, whereas I didn't know that I'd be able to work around it before. I remember when we were doing Logic of English and my son had his first CBC words, which always had the letter A in the middle. We're from the Midwest. We say CBC A words with 2 syllables, basically. And he was reading probably CAN, and he'd say Ken. And I'm like, oh, honey, we're from the Midwest. We say can. And then pen. And I'm like, no, pan. And it's not that I was correcting his pronunciation. If he grows up and he uses more of a non-accent kind of way, that would be fine. But he was like, I don't know what a Ken is, or I don't know what a pen is. And I'd be like, it's can or pan. He was, oh, I know what that is. So, doesn't matter where you live in the US, there's going to be things you say differently than everybody else. And that's okay. So that's tip number 5. Okay. So this is like a bonus tip, but always, I'm not a never or always person. I'm too laid back for that. But one good thing to do is if you are listening to a review of somebody, you can check their other reviews of other products and sort of get an understanding of how they review things, what they prioritize, what's important to them. Like I said, what kind of things they like. And you're like, ooh, I can't stand that, and they love it. Then you may not like the other things they like, or you may, but it gives you extra pieces in the puzzle to help you make that decision. Okay, and bonus tip number 2, Rainbow Resources YouTube channel has great videos on subjects. Like if you look up Rainbow Resource, math, science, social studies, reading, because they're not reviews of specific programs, but they're reviews of how that subject is taught, the different varieties of ways it's taught. Their social studies one was fascinating. It went through the whole history of how we teach social studies now compared to when it first, they first started teaching it. Fascinating video on its own, even if you're not looking. I'll link to that one below, and then you can get to the other ones. But that one's really interesting, even if you're not looking for a social studies program. But anyway, so they will talk about different ways of teaching, and then they'll say, now these fall into this, these fall into this, and these fall into this. And this is a complete curriculum. This is one that you're going to have to add something for this part. It's very thorough. It's very helpful. It's very unbiased because they don't, they sell all of them, so they're not going to have one that's the best. And they're very good at saying, I think the one lady mentioned some things they've used, but she doesn't say like, this is the best one, that's why we used it. She's very upfront about why she used it, why it worked for her family. And my favorite thing about their videos is that when they're talking about choosing a curriculum, they always include the parent's teaching style. It is something I didn't consider at all when I started looking. I thought it all needed to be about my daughter. She was the only one in school at the time. It all needed to be about her learning style. And then as my son started, it had to be all about his learning style because that's how they learn. But I found out through the years, you really do need to consider your teaching style, because if you're teaching something that's very teacher intensive and you have 5 or 6 or 7 kids running around, it's not going to get done. And you may miss more days than if you had something a little bit more independent. So it is important to consider that aspect. And my teaching style has changed. I have 4 children, and as my youngest gets older, I have more time to teach. When he was younger, I had to teach from the couch. Obviously, when he was an infant and nursing, I had to teach mostly from the couch, or, when he was asleep, and I didn't have the time to sit and, like write on a whiteboard. We usually don't do that anyway, but that is something we all have to consider. And I think I'm a better teacher, so it helps them. And I do still consider their learning style in it. So, bonus tip number 3. Is that right? Somebody keeping track. And this one will be really quick, but if you don't get the perfect fit the first time, know that you are not alone. My fear, I know for a while, was, oh my gosh, I'm going to be one of those curriculum jumpers. I'm going to hop from one thing to the other for the rest of their schooling, and then they'll get to the end and they won't know anything. If you don't pick the best match for your student, if you pick what you think is going to be perfect, oh my gosh, I've been disappointed more times than I can count. Well, 3 particular, I can't count. 3 very specific cases. I was super disappointed in the curriculum that I bought, because I had such high hopes for it. 2 that I really had high hopes for, another one that I thought was going to work, and just was like one of the worst things we've ever used. I dropped that like week 2. But so don't be afraid to admit that, hey, I thought this was going to be the perfect fit for my family. I was super excited about it. It's not working. I realize none of us have an endless budget for homeschooling. 100% understand that. I don't either. I don't have a huge budget for homeschooling. And so when something doesn't work, you feel that financial, like, oh my God, I spent money on this. A lot of things hold their value, and you can sell and buy sell groups or on eBay. Yeah, I had that wrong, but or even local homeschool groups. But yeah, don't be like, and lose your confidence, because it happens to the best of us. And sometimes something just looks right, and then when you get it home and you're actually using it, it just doesn't fit in with your family. So those are my tips. If you have tips, leave them in the comments so that we can learn from you as well. We all need to learn from each other, right? So and then the link to the social studies review, or social studies video, I guess not a review, but thingamajig from Rainbow Resource will be in the description box, so you can check out that video. Super interesting. If you have any questions, let me know. If I wasn't clear on something, let me know. Forgive me if any of this, you totally disagree with. That's fine. We all have our own thoughts on all of this, and I know some of you aren't going to agree with everything I said, and that's great. You can let me know that in the comment section too. And we will see you next time, guys. Happy homeschooling and curriculum hunting.